CVM Central.
Need to estimate your duty? Perform a track and trace? Search for a declaration? Then download the Jamaica Customs mobile app today. The time by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
12 p.m.
Thanks for joining us for CVM News at noon. It's Monday, February 9, 2026. I'm Amoy Harriet. We begin with shocking news that a 4-year-old girl has been shot and killed in Woodstock, Manchester, in a brazen gun attack Sunday afternoon. Police reports indicate that shortly after 4 p.m., little Sonia O'Brien and her father were seated in a motor vehicle when gunmen approached, alighted and opened fire. When the shooting ended, both were found suffering from gunshot wounds and were rushed to hospital. Sonia later succumbed to her injuries, while her father, up to news time, remains hospitalized. Police investigations into the incident are ongoing. A man is dead and 5 others injured in 2 separate road crashes in Westmoreland on the weekend. In the first incident, a 50-year-old Guardsman Limited security guard died in a motor vehicle accident along a section of the Norman Manley Boulevard in Negril, Westmoreland on Saturday. He has been identified as Greg Brown of a Whitehall district address, also in Negril. Reports say that shortly after 6 p.m., Brown was riding his motorcycle when he lost control of the bike and crashed into the median in the middle of the roadway. He was rushed to hospital with head and body injuries. He was later pronounced dead. Now, in the second incident, 5 people were seriously injured in a 3-vehicle collision along a section of Cave Main Road leading to Belmont in Westmoreland on Sunday afternoon. Up to news time, traffic investigators told our newsroom they're still unable to confirm if there were any fatalities. Now, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, has established a new specialized investigation branch aimed at strengthening the force's capacity to handle complex, high-risk and sensitive criminal investigations. The move forms part of the JCF's ongoing modernization and transformation agenda and will see several elite investigative units consolidated under a single command structure. The new branch brings together divisions including the Fraud Squad, the National Strategic Anti-Gang Division, the Transnational Crime Investigation Division, and the Jamaica Fugitive Apprehension Team, among others. Now, according to the High Command, the reorganization is intended to improve coordination, close operational gaps, enhance oversight, and reinforce institutional integrity while supporting intelligence-led policing and stronger collaboration with forensic and partner agencies. Now, the specialized investigation branch is expected to play a central role in disrupting organized and transnational criminal networks while improving accountability and prosecutorial readiness. Now, police in Hanover have launched a manhunt after the parish recorded its 4th murder since the start of the year. Detectives in Lucy are searching for 2 men believed to be behind last week's killing of 29-year-old Anil Getten, otherwise known as Blacks, of a Sandy Bay address. Residents reported gunfire shortly after 10:30 Wednesday night. Police later found Getten lying on a roadway with multiple gunshot wounds. The scene was processed and the body removed to the morgue. Investigators say Hanover, once considered a quiet parish, has seen a troubling rise in murders since 2026. Now, road safety remains a major concern for authorities as they continue to urge motorists to develop responsible driving habits. According to Director General of the Island Traffic Authority, Colonel Daniel Price, simple actions behind the wheel can save lives.
Respect the learning process. Obey speed limits. Listen carefully to your instructor. Stay focused on the road and understand that every action behind the wheel carries consequence. These are not just rules. They are lifelines. Respect the learning process.
Now, Member of Parliament for Western Hanover, Heather Miller-Bennett, has reported major flooding issues due to overburdened infrastructure. She indicated last week that major flooding has caused damage to properties, buildings and motor vehicles across Lucy and surrounding communities for years. She says until the infrastructure issue is addressed, this problem will continue to affect lives and livelihoods in the parish.
Hanover has outgrown its infrastructure. We have drains that were built decades ago. We have new developments, we have new communities, large investment in hotels. We have, if you look in the town centre, quite a few plazas, but it's the same drainage system. It just can't manage. Lucy, Hanover has outgrown.
The government is looking to change how Jamaica's road network is managed with a proposal to create a single body to oversee standards and coordination. Works Minister Robert Morgan says the move is intended to reduce confusion about responsibility for roads and improve long-term maintenance. Kevin Black reports.
The government is now moving to establish a one road authority designed to improve accountability, standardize road construction, and create a clear system for managing Jamaica's road network. Speaking at the Rotary Club of Kingston's weekly meeting, Minister with responsibility for works, Robert Morgan, says the initiative will help bring greater coordination and transparency in how roads are managed across the island.
Roads are not just infrastructure. So the layman will look and see asphalt, sidewalks, drainage manholes, but they are essentially the arteries, the veins of your economy, of your society. What we are proposing to do is have a designation criteria that is very transparent and objective, where every year the agency will look at the roads across Jamaica and say, this road should become a main road, this road is no longer qualified to become a main road, and so on. So
Minister Morgan insists patching roads is not a long-term solution and that the One Road Authority will help ensure more durable and well-maintained roads.
patching, while a part of your road rehabilitation toolbox, is not the ultimate solution to your road infrastructure development. The ultimate solution is to repave. But because for so long we have not had the resources to properly fix all our roads, we have had to develop a system of incrementally patching. You will have a system where you can report and hold accountable for the damage to the roads.
The minister says a new online road registry will also be created, allowing Jamaicans to see who is responsible for roads and report problems more easily.
We're going to fix that. And we're starting with the Jamaica Road website, which will outline what will happen, which will outline the obligations of contractors for your roads. And yes, we're going to use fines to cause people to act in accordance with what the law says.
Kevin Black reporting for CVM News.
It's time now for a break. Stay with us. Our live interview comes up next.
Every day starts with care. Care that's always close. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is where you go for everything you need. From your morning routine to life's biggest moments. Supermed Family of Pharmacies is always by your side. Whether it's prescriptions or household essentials, trust the care that's close to home. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVMTV.
So much more.
The U.S. has been increasing pressure on the Cuban government through a range of economic and diplomatic measures. What does this mean for the Cuban government's ability to manage the country's current economic challenges? And what does this mean for other nationals living in Cuba and by extension the region? We're joined now by Chairman of the Left Alliance for National Democracy and Socialism, LANS, Christophe Simpson. Thanks so much for being here with us this afternoon, Christophe.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to me first of all about the developments coming out of Cuba, Cuba versus the U.S. Talk to me about those developments.
Well, the U.S. has been trying to overthrow the Cuban government since the 1960s. There was a revolution in 1959. They overthrew a U.S.-backed dictatorship. They had treated Cuba like Epstein Island at the time. They had brothels, casinos. That was the main service part of the economy. You had terrible unemployment, terrible poverty. A lot of people didn't live in proper houses. But the American private sector benefited a lot from that situation, because what you had is most of the farms and factories were owned by Americans, where Cubans now, they were just working on these farms and in these factories for very low wages, but nothing was really Cuban owned. When the revolution came into power, they nationalized some businesses that were American owned. There were discussions on compensation. They offered what they believed to be fair compensation based on prices that they had acquired some of these businesses and assets for. But they never accepted the outcome of the revolution. And that private sector lobby has since been lobbying the US government to strangle Cuba to try to overthrow the government. No, the policy wasn't successful. After 6 decades, the Cuban government is still standing. But I have here an excerpt from what they call the Mallory Memorandum, the justification for the policies. So it's 6 points, and points 1 to 5 basically admit that the US government estimated that the Cuban government was popular. And there's no way to cause people in Cuba to oppose them from the inside, because people in Cuba love the government at the time. Still love the government now, and can substantiate that. But point 6 now, after accepting that points 1 to 5 are saying the government has popular support, there's no way to support any opposition or anything. They're not going to get enough support. So number 6 says, the only foreseeable means of alienating internal support is through disenchantment and disaffection based on economic dissatisfaction and hardship. And it follows. And these are US government documents, publicly available. So if the above are accepted or can't be successfully countered, it follows that every possible means should be undertaken promptly to weaken the economic life of Cuba. And what that means is you need to make a policy that, and quoting again, makes the greatest inroads in denying money and supplies to Cuba, to decrease monetary wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow the governments.
So on that note, we saw where the Cuban president said that no fuel has entered the country since the naval blockade on Venezuela that was imposed in December. How has this oil blockade affected the country?
Well, a country can't operate without fuel. If we had an oil blockade in Jamaica, we'd collapse in less than a week. You have to think about people getting from place to place to get to work. You have to think about keeping the lights on, not just in the homes, but in the hospitals, in sites of production. Keeping the lights on to keep fridges on for people to store food. Babies are at risk of dying in hospitals now. Cuba had a lower infant mortality rate than the US. Sorry, they had a lower infant mortality rate than the US. They were praised for the low infant mortality rates, how it matches up with the world. And that's at risk of being thrown aside now.
But there are Jamaicans living in Cuba. What does this then mean for these Jamaicans?
Life is going to become more difficult. Most Jamaicans would be in Cuba for studying. I have a cousin that is studying in Cuba. She's home for the break, and I ask her, like, are you prepped to go back? She has to have multiple power banks and things like that.
Given the power outage that the country is now facing over there.
Yeah, because you don't have means to communicate with your family while you're in a foreign country under certain conditions. It's stressful for you and the family. But outside that, the Cubans actually living there, especially the ones living outside of the major cities. They're the ones that are going to be really feeling this the hardest. You don't have fuel to move food from the farms to people's tables or the sites that people would buy food from. And you don't have electricity to operate the telecommunications network. They're engineering a collapse of Cuban society, and this document that I just read, it shows they can't bring down the government through democratic means, so what they have to do is strangle the people and make life hard so that the people have no choice but to feel like they have to tear down everything, or if the US decides to invade like they did to Grenada in 1983, the Cuban people not going to have the energy to fight back.
So as it relates to those Jamaicans who are in Cuba, what, if anything, can our government here in Jamaica do for these persons?
It's very tricky to talk about what the government can do because the US is threatening the entire region. And Bruce Golding was on CVM saying it the other day. It's very, very difficult for the government to take certain measures right now. If they took it from the angle of supporting students, of course, doing that, they wouldn't be able to send fuel over. But there are ways that you can prep students, but they're very, very small ways. There's not much the government can do except advocate. In the same way, when Marco Rubio came to Jamaica and was talking foolishness about the medical collaboration being human trafficking, Andrew Holness stood up and said, no, it's not. We don't consider it that way. We appreciated that. What they can do is talk about the welfare of the students and how that's been affected. But as you know, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia says the US doesn't even want Caribbean students studying in Cuba.
Right, and on that note, which by the way the US has denied, but what do you make of that situation? Do you think that it's possible that there may be other countries in the region that the US might force to stop doing business with Cuba?
For sure. They've been trying for years, you know. They've been trying to get countries to stop the medical collaboration, the educational collaboration, and in two ways. So the students that go to Cuba, they don't want that anymore. They don't want people to go to Cuba and know the reality of Cuba. And they don't want Cuban doctors and teachers to be coming into the region either. They want to stifle any sort of contact that Cuba has with the outside world. They want to isolate and strangle the Cuban economy.
So we saw where Jamaica was threatened with sanctions in 2020, and the US has been open about using sanctions, as we've seen here, to intentionally create hardship among the general population or for countries. Could this still be a possibility for us here in Jamaica?
Yes, and it's why the government has to be careful about what it says and does. So the government, we always estimated the government as being pro-US, but now it's a little trickier to look at it in that light sometimes, because after 2020 was a real turning point. Not only sanctions, but the US was very unfriendly to Jamaica in 2020. They blocked ventilators and other critical supplies from reaching Jamaica. The government has shown that it's willing to strong-arm countries in the region. So right now, more than ever, after kidnapping the president of Venezuela, after the spate of bombings of the fishing boats that they were doing in the region, and just overall displays of force, any government of a small country like ours that is going to stand up and defy the US will rightfully fear being threatened.